They tied her hands, marked her face for death, and cast her into a canyon no one ever returned from. But what they didn't know was that the girl they tried to erase would come back. Not to beg, not to forgive, but to rise and change the West forever. Beneath the blood-red dawn of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, a girl knelt in silence. Her wrists were bound with rawhide. Death marks, lines of ochre and charcoal, had been drawn across her face like whispers from another world. Around her, a circle of elders watched with grim detachment, their expressions carved from stone, as if the ritual had already separated her from the living. No one spoke her name. No one wept. They were here to cast her out. Her name was Lena Graycloud, 15 summers old, the child of 2 bloodlines, one Apache, one white. Her mother had died birthing her. Her father had been a trapper who vanished into the northern wilds, leaving only green eyes and untamed hair as proof of his existence. Raised by her grandmother, Tama, Lena had learned the old ways: how to grind corn with rhythm and prayer, how to read the weather and wind patterns, how to trace the spirit's path in firelight. But no lesson could teach her how to be accepted by people who feared what she represented. The valley had turned against her. There had been no rain for 4 moons. The river was no more than a wound in the earth, and the children had begun to die, taken by fever, one by one. When the crops withered and the buffalo stayed away, the elders turned to prophecy. When prophecy failed, they turned to fear, and fear always needs a face. The shaman Makona stepped forward, draped in feathers and smoke. His voice rose like thunder over the cracked earth. "The spirits have spoken," he said. "The one born between the worlds has brought this curse upon us. Her blood is a fracture, her presence a poison." A murmur swept through the gathered tribe. It wasn't the first time Lena had heard the word, fracture. She had heard it whispered behind woven blankets and beneath starlight, spoken as if she were an illness carried in skin and bone. It was an old hatred, wearing a new mask. Only one person broke the silence: Tama. The elder woman emerged from the shadows like a ghost of a forgotten time, her silver hair braided with beads of turquoise and bone. She limped forward, every step a defiance. "She is of my blood," Tama said, her voice sharp as flint. "She honors the old ways. She walks with respect. You speak of balance, but what balance is there in casting a child into death?" Makona's eyes narrowed. "The canyon will decide." A ripple passed through the circle, the canyon of forgotten echoes. It was more than a name, it was a sentence, a chasm split into the earth, a wound no god had bothered to close. The old stories said it was where the dead whispered through wind and bone, where spirits lost to time still searched for warmth. No one who entered it returned. Not animals, not men, not even echoes of prayers. "She goes at first light," Makona declared. "She will carry nothing but water and spirit, no weapon, no protection. If she returns after 3 suns, then the spirits will have answered. If she does not, her death will be our peace." The gathering dissolved. No one spoke to Lena. No one touched her. They turned their backs as if she had already vanished. That night, beneath a sky torn with stars, Lena sat beside the dying fire with Tama. Neither of them ate. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been spoken through years of survival. Tama placed a leather pouch into her granddaughter's hands. "Your mother wore this the day she passed," she said. "Inside is sage for clarity, turquoise for strength, and a piece of her hair. Carry her with you." Lena held the pouch tightly, afraid that letting go would mean letting go of herself. "Will you tell them about me?" she whispered. Tama's eyes glistened. "If they let me. If not, I will speak your name to the stars." When dawn came, Lena stood at the edge of the village, a single water gourd slung over her shoulder. 2 warriors flanked her, Whitehawk and Broken Tree. They avoided her gaze. They weren't cruel men, just obedient. That made it worse. They walked for half the morning in silence. The landscape changed slowly, grass to brush, brush to rock. The ground grew redder, harsher, until even the plants seemed to recoil from the sun. Eventually, the warriors stopped. The earth ended ahead of them. The canyon of forgotten echoes opened like the mouth of a buried god. Its walls were jagged, striped with layers of ancient time. The wind that rose from it didn't feel like wind at all. It felt like breath. Like something down there was still alive, still waiting. Whitehawk cut the rawhide from Lena's wrists and handed her the gourd. His mouth opened, as if to speak, but no words came. He simply turned and walked away, the other following. She was alone. The sun climbed high, casting shadows that stretched like fingers into the abyss. Lena looked down, then closed her eyes. If she cried, the canyon would drink her tears like wine. If she screamed, the echoes would carry her pain into the bones of the earth. She would give it neither. Lena Graycloud took 1 step forward and disappeared into the mouth of death. And somewhere, beneath the red sky and the trembling wind, the spirits began to stir. The first thing Lena Graycloud noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that follows snowfall or rests in meadows before dawn. This was different. This silence pressed in from all sides, thick and watchful, as though the canyon itself had ears. Each of her steps kicked up red dust that hung in the air like memory. The deeper she went, the less she could hear of the world she'd left behind. No bird song, no wind in the grass. Just the shifting whisper of her own breath and the brittle crunch of stone beneath her. Bare feet. The canyon of forgotten echoes was not merely a place. It was a wound. A deep, endless rupture carved by forces older than maps, older than stories. Its sandstone walls rose like cathedral spires around her, stained with streaks of iron and shadows. Strange symbols, spirals, handprints, shapes resembling animals and people, were etched into the rock. Some so faded they seemed more imagined than real. Lena touched them as she passed, drawn not by understanding, but by a pull she couldn't explain. The air smelled of salt and something ancient, like dry bones and forgotten prayers. By midday, the sun hovered like a burning eye overhead. Lena's skin blistered, her lips cracked. The water gourd at her hip felt too light. She rationed small sips, her tongue shrinking with thirst. Her hunger had already vanished, replaced by a quiet ache that lived in her ribs. But worse than the thirst was the heat. It made her mind slow and her thoughts curl into themselves like dying leaves. By dusk, she'd found no shelter, just broken rocks and the occasional bleached bone. She passed the skeletal remains of something large, maybe a bison, maybe something older. Its ribs jutted upward like a shipwreck, draped in wind and silence. She crouched beside it, eyes scanning for danger. Her heartbeat felt distant, more memory than sensation. Time unraveled here. 1 minute stretched forever, and entire hours vanished like smoke. That night, the stars came out sharp and cold. Lena curled beneath the curved remains of the beast, pulling her thin shawl tight against the chill. Sleep didn't come. The canyon seemed to shift with every blink. Shadows stretched longer, sounds warped, and the silence transformed into whispers she couldn't trace. She dreamed with her eyes open. Of Tama standing at the canyon's edge, calling her name in a voice Lena couldn't reach. Of Makona's staff slamming into dust. Of her mother, only a silhouette, reaching down with an open hand that Lena couldn't grasp. Morning came without warmth. Her body ached. Her feet were raw. Her water was nearly gone. Still, she walked. She followed a narrow pass deeper into the canyon, her eyes searching for anything, shade, moss, a sign. The walls narrowed so tightly at one point she had to turn sideways to pass through. On the other side, the world opened again, and there, tucked into a cliff face, was a strange sight. A small opening, half covered in vines and thorn brush, barely tall enough for her to crawl through. Something about it hummed beneath her skin. She pushed the branches aside, ignoring the sting of thorns, and crawled inside. It was a cave. Cool. Dark. The first breath she took inside it tasted of damp stone and minerals. Her eyes adjusted slowly, and she could just make out the curve of the walls, the low ceiling, and, miraculously, a glimmering pool of water in the far corner. Crystal clear, fed by a thin trickle from above. She fell to her knees, drinking, until her stomach ached, then sat back, dizzy with relief. Tears burned in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not here, not yet. She explored the space slowly. Carvings lined the inner walls, more deliberate than the ones outside. Not just marks, but stories. Figures etched in profile. A woman standing between two groups, her hands raised in peace. Another of a girl touching a wolf, both bathed in stars. And in the largest panel, a figure walking into a chasm, surrounded by eyes. Lena reached out and traced that last figure with her fingers. It felt like truth, like prophecy carved into stone long before she was born. As she sat in the cool stillness, the cave grew darker. But then came a sound that froze her breath. A low growl, not angry, not surprised, just present. Lena turned slowly. In the shadows, no more than 10 paces away, stood a gray wolf. Its fur was patchy with age, its ribs visible, its eyes a pale yellow that didn't blink. It didn't move forward, didn't bare its teeth. It just watched. She remembered a lesson Tama once whispered. The old spirits come in many forms. Some walk on 4 legs, some wear fur. But they are never just animals. Lena didn't reach for a rock, didn't shout. She stayed still, pulse trembling in her throat. The wolf tilted its head. Then, after what felt like hours, it turned away and walked into the deeper dark of the cave. It didn't look back. She wasn't sure if it was warning her or protecting her, but either way, it had seen her, judged her, and let her stay. Lena remained in the cave for another day, gathering strength, storing what little water she could in carved-out stone bowls. She wrapped her feet in strips torn from her shawl and rested under the curve of the wall where the wolf had stood. There, dreams returned. Not haunted, but calm. She saw her mother, not in pain, but singing. She saw the stars fall around her like snow. She saw herself, not broken, but whole. When she left the cave, the canyon no longer felt like a tomb. It still held death, still whispered of sacrifice, but it also held memory, choice, the even hope. The girl who entered had been led to die, but the one walking out was listening, and something was beginning to listen back. The sound came like thunder across the stillness, a sharp, distant crack that echoed between the canyon walls. At first, Lena didn't believe it was real. She had been alone with silence and shadows for too long. But then it came again, unmistakable this time, the report of a rifle. She turned toward the sound, shielding her eyes from the slanting light of the afternoon sun. Dust swirled in the distance, disturbed by movement far above. Her heart surged, not with fear, but something dangerously close to hope. Then a figure appeared at the edge of the canyon rim. On horseback. Dark hat, long coat. a rifle slung across his back. The rider paused only a moment before dismounting and beginning the descent. He didn't shout. He didn't hesitate. He moved with purpose, scanning the terrain, knowing exactly where to place his feet. Whoever he was, he'd done this before. Lena stayed low, heart pounding in her throat. She was weak, too weak to run, too dry to cry out. Her lips had split from days of sun and silence. Her body was more dust than blood, but she couldn't look away from the man who climbed steadily down the red stone walls toward her. When he reached the canyon floor, he saw her at once. His steps slowed, and he removed his hat. He looked human, kind even, but tired, the kind of tired that lived in the eyes, not the body. "I don't mean you harm," he said gently, voice carrying through the dry air. "You look like you've had about enough of that." Lena blinked. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The man crouched a few feet away, unscrewed the cap of his canteen and held it out. "Drink slow," he said. "It's colder than it looks." She reached for it with trembling hands and drank. The water tasted like forgiveness. "I'm Elias," he said. "Elias Vance. I've got a ranch about a half-day's ride from here. Was out looking for a missing calf when I spotted movement down here. Figured it was either something wounded or something dangerous." He looked her over, not with suspicion but with quiet concern. "Looks like it was a bit of both." Lena tried to speak, but the words died in her throat. Still, something in Elias seemed to understand. He didn't press. Instead, he wrapped her in a blanket from his saddlebag, lifted her into the saddle, and began the slow journey back to the world she thought had forgotten her. The ride out of the canyon was a blur. Sunlight against her eyelids, the steady rhythm of the horse, the warmth of Elias's coat against her skin. She drifted in and out of consciousness, catching only fragments. The rustle of dry grass, the scent of leather and sweat, the deep voice humming a tune she didn't know. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer in the canyon. She lay on a bed of wool blankets inside a warm room, with thick log walls and soft firelight flickering across the ceiling. The smell of stew lingered in the air, and a gentle hand was brushing her hair back from her face. "Look at you, poor thing," came a voice, older and sharp-edged with tenderness. "You're more bone than girl. Let's see if we can fix that." The woman was short, with wild gray curls pinned back under a kerchief and a face full of sharp angles and strong opinions. She introduced herself as Maureen O'Callaghan and announced that, for the foreseeable future, Lena would be her patient, her responsibility, and possibly her biggest headache. Maureen worked like a woman born for war and healing in equal measure. She bathed Lena with warm water and patience, coaxed her into eating spoonfuls of broth, and spoke to her like she was someone worth saving. Elias came and went quietly, bringing in firewood, asking nothing, offering more with silence than words ever could. As the days passed, Lena began to mend. Her strength returned slowly. The tremble in her hands faded. Her sleep grew deeper. Sometimes, when the pain in her side lessened enough, she would sit on the porch wrapped in a quilt, watching the horses in the field as the sun set behind the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Elias joined her once. He leaned against the post, arms crossed, and said nothing for a long time. Then, softly, "You've got something in you. Most people, they break. You didn't." Lena didn't know how to respond, but something in her shifted, not just in her body, but in her spirit. It was the first time in a long while someone had seen her and not recoiled, not turned away, not painted her with fear. She spoke her name for the first time since the canyon. Lena Graycloud. He nodded like it was a name worth remembering. "You're welcome here, Lena, for as long as you need." At Lazy Fee Ranch, she found not just shelter but rhythm, routine, healing. She fed chickens, helped Maureen sort herbs and supplies, and even began to learn how to saddle a horse. Elias taught her how to mend fences and how to shoot, not for war, but for protection. She took to it quickly. Her hands, though once frail, remembered precision. And still, she said little about where she had come from. Elias didn't ask. Maureen didn't push. But one evening, as the wind blew in hard from the west, carrying the scent of oncoming storm, Lena sat beside Elias and finally told the truth. "I was left to die," she said, "by my own people." Elias didn't flinch. He nodded once. "Well," he said, "seems they didn't know what they were letting go." Lena looked out across the fields, where the horses ran free against the gathering dark. Neither did I, she thought. But I'm starting to. The wind had changed. It carried with it the scent of gun oil and smoke, of sweat and something darker, something human. Elias Vance noticed it first, standing atop the pasture ridge at Lazy Fee Ranch, staring out toward the desert as though he could hear the future riding toward him. That future had a name. Rafe Delgado. A name whispered in taverns, cursed in church pews, and feared in every canyon stretch between Taos and Santa Fe. He was more myth than man, part Mexican, part Comanche, all blood and thunder. He rode with a gang known as the Dust Howlers, men without conscience, who swept through ranches like fire through dry grass. The last place they passed through had nothing left standing, no cattle, no crops, no people. The news came with a rider's warning, 2 days' distance, maybe less. The ranchers of the region gathered under Elias's roof, boots muddy, hats in hand, eyes hard. Men who had carved homes from wilderness now looked to Elias for answers. He didn't give a speech. He didn't need to. He simply said, "We hold the line." Not everyone stayed. Some packed their wagons and headed north under cover of night, praying the howlers would pass them by. But those who remained began preparing for war, not because they wanted it, but because it was already coming. Lena watched it unfold with a quiet stillness. She saw how Elias moved through each hour like a man measuring time by its usefulness. She saw how Maureen stockpiled bandages and herbs in silence, as though preparing for a funeral she hadn't yet scheduled. Lena's hands began to help, splitting wood, filling water barrels, cleaning rifles. But the moment that changed everything came on a dusk when the sky bled gold and the horses were restless. Elias and Lena stood near the corral when he turned to her, hands rough and tired. "You don't have to stay." Lena didn't flinch. "I do. I didn't mean it like that," he said gently. "You've been through enough. This isn't your fight." She met his gaze. "I was cast out to die, Elias. But here, this land, these people, they gave me something I didn't think I deserved. A place, a chance. I won't run from that. Not again." Elias nodded once, eyes tight with emotion. "Then you'd better learn how to shoot faster than I thought." Maureen was the one who trained her. Turns out the sharp-tongued woman had once fought alongside her brothers in the border wars of Texas and had the aim of someone who didn't miss twice. They practiced in the early morning light before the sun turned the earth into fire. "Shoot with your bones, not your eyes," Maureen instructed, adjusting Lena's grip. "And never waste a bullet on fear. That stuff don't bleed." Lena took to it quickly. She wasn't the fastest, but she was the most focused. Her hands remembered precision from the herbs, the fire pits, the years of silence where her life depended on listening. The morning of the attack came with an eerie stillness. No birds, no breeze. The land itself seemed to hold its breath. Then came the thunder. 30 riders poured over the ridge like shadows on horseback. Rafe Delgado led them, dark coat flaring like wings, a wide-brimmed hat casting his face in shadow. But his eyes burned through it, cold and wild and without mercy. The first shots cracked through the air. Ranchers took their positions behind wagon wheels and fence posts. Elias fired from the barn's upper loft. Maureen held the northern line with 2 others. Lena moved like breath through the chaos, steady and sharp, her rifle aimed with the calm of someone who had already faced death and walked out the other side. The howlers were brutal. 2 men fell early. Fires lit across the barn and the sheds. Horses screamed and bolts snapped. Still, the ranch held. Then Rafe broke through the line. He rode hard, pistol in each hand, carving a path toward Elias. Lena saw it happen before anyone else. Elias, exposed on the ridge, too slow to reload. She ran without thinking, leaping over broken planks, dodging bullets that sang past her ears. Rafe raised his gun. Lena didn't hesitate. She threw herself between them just as the shot rang out. The pain came like lightning, hot, immediate, and total. She collapsed against the dirt, unable to breathe. The sky rolled above her, spinning in fractured light. Somewhere in the distance, she heard Elias's voice break, raw and panicked. Then the world went dark. She didn't know how long she drifted. When she awoke, it was Maureen's face above her, tears streaking through soot and blood. "You damn stubborn girl," she whispered, hands pressed against the wound at Lena's side. "You don't get to leave yet. You hear me?" Lena tried to speak, but her mouth was full of dust and iron. Later, she would learn the others had rallied, that Elias had taken down Rafe Delgado with a final, desperate shot, that the remaining howlers scattered like ash in the wind. But in that moment, lying broken in the dirt, Lena only knew this. She had chosen to stay. She had bled for it. And for the first time in her life, she had truly belonged to something worth dying for. The world came back in fragments, a flickering flame, the distant howl of wind, the smell of blood, pine resin, and healing herbs. Lena Graycloud lay suspended between pain and waking, her body mending the wound left by a bullet meant for someone else. Every breath reminded her that life was still hers, though barely. Maureen never left her side. The woman who once barked commands with the sharpness of a rifle now murmured lullabies in her accent-worn voice, applying poultices and stitching skin with hands as steady as any surgeon. Elias came and went, silent as always, grief and guilt hiding behind tired eyes. He hadn't said much since the battle, not after carrying Lena's broken body from the field like something sacred. But in the quiet hours of recovery, Lena felt something stirring, not just in her flesh but deeper, a sense that she had crossed another threshold, one not marked by cliffs or judgment, but by fire and sacrifice. She had made her choice. She had stayed. She had fought. And now she had survived. When the fever broke and strength returned to her limbs, Lena began to walk again. First with a cane carved from twisted cedar, then on her own. The ranch was scarred but still standing. Charred boards, broken windows, scorched fields. Proof that the land had endured, just like the people who tended it. The other ranchers who'd fought beside them stopped by often, bringing bread, tools, stories. And always they nodded to Lena with something new in their eyes, not fear, not pity. Respect. One morning, Maureen brought her a letter. It was sealed with red wax and smelled faintly of smoke and ink. Lena turned it over in her hands, puzzled. "It's from Denver," Maureen said. "From an old friend of mine, Dr. Callahan. He trains women like you, brave, smart, capable. He runs a medical program, half modern science, half frontier survival. I told him your story." Lena looked up, startled. "Why?" "Because you're meant for more than this place," Maureen replied, her voice suddenly thick. "I love this ranch, but I didn't crawl through war to watch you waste what you carry. The canyon tried to kill you. The world tried to forget you. You didn't just live through it, you changed because of it. That means something." Lena opened the letter with shaking hands. She read it once, then again. It wasn't a plea, it was an invitation. A 6-month training program in Denver, full support, room and board. A promise that if she succeeded, she'd return to serve the territories, bridging the wisdom of her people and the tools of modern medicine. The decision didn't come quickly. She wandered the ranch for days, speaking little, listening much. The horses knew something was changing. So did the land. Even the wind seemed to hum with tension, as if waiting for her to choose. It was Elias who finally broke the silence. He found her out by the fence line, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. "You thinking of going?" he asked, his voice as rough as the timber beneath his hand. She nodded, slowly. "It feels like the right step." Elias didn't look surprised. He just nodded and stared toward the horizon. "You belong to more than this place, Lena. We both knew that." She turned to him, heart heavy with something she hadn't named until that moment. "You saved me." "No," he said, his eyes soft. "You saved yourself. I just got lucky enough to see it." There was a stillness between them then, filled with all the words they wouldn't say. Love lived there, unspoken but undeniable. It didn't need promises. It didn't ask for forever. It was enough to have known each other in the in-between. The morning Lena left, the entire ranch gathered to see her off. Even the horses seemed to sense it was goodbye. She wore a new dress Maureen had sewn, her braid threaded with her mother's turquoise bead, and a strip of the same rawhide that once bound her hands. As the train approached, chugging like a mechanical beast from the edge of the desert, Lena turned to Elias one last time. "If I don't come back—" "You will," he said, before she could finish. "But even if you didn't, you've already brought something back to this land." She pressed the leather pouch Tama had given her against her chest. Inside, the sage, the turquoise, and a lock of her mother's hair still waited, still guiding. It wasn't just memory, it was inheritance, and it would travel with her wherever she went. When the train pulled away, Lena stood at the window, watching the desert fall away behind her. The mountains shrank in the distance, but their shape was carved into her bones now. So was the silence of the canyon, the face of the wolf, the fire in Maureen's eyes, the steadiness of Elias's hands, the breath of a life nearly taken, now being rebuilt with every mile of steel and steam. She was not the girl who had been sentenced to die. She was not even the same girl who had chosen to stay. She was something else now, something stronger. A bridge between two worlds. And as she rode toward Denver and all it held, knowledge, challenge, purpose, she felt the canyon behind her not as a curse, but as a beginning. A place that had swallowed her whole only to spit her out remade. The spirits had watched her. The earth had tested her. And she had emerged, not broken, but blessed. Lena Graycloud's story is not one of simple survival. It is one of transformation. From the first moment she knelt in the red dust of Red Earth Valley, sentenced by her own people to die for what she represented, her life was no longer hers alone. It became a question cast into the canyon, one that the spirits, the land, and time itself were bound to answer. Born of two worlds and accepted by neither, Lena was condemned not because of what she had done, but because of what she was, a bridge. And for those who live in fear, bridges are dangerous. They connect what was never meant to meet. They disrupt comfort. They threaten order. but they are also what allow new paths to be formed, paths strong enough to carry generations forward. When Lena was cast into the canyon of forgotten echoes, it was not just a test of physical endurance. It was an exile wrapped in fear, a sacrifice dressed as tradition. But in that sacred haunted place, she did not meet her end. She met herself. She found in the silence of the canyon the pieces of a forgotten identity, etched on stone walls, whispered through ancient carvings, echoed in the quiet grace of a gray wolf who saw her and chose not to strike. What the world above saw as cursed, the canyon saw as necessary. It did not offer her comfort. It did not promise survival. It simply gave her space to become. When Elias Vance entered her story, he did not save her. He saw her. In a world full of men who turned away, he stepped toward. A quiet rancher carved from hardship and stillness, Elias offered not rescue, but respect. He gave Lena the first true sanctuary she'd ever known. A place where she could heal, not hide. And in that shelter Lena grew not softer but stronger. When danger returned in the form of Rafe Delgado and the dust howlers, Lena did not run. She chose to stand, alongside Elias, Maureen, and the others who had taken her in without question. In doing so, she put herself between death and the people she had come to love. The bullet she caught was not an accident. It was a decision. She was not just fighting for survival anymore. She was defending her place in the world. The moment she was shot marked the end of the girl who had entered the canyon, and the beginning of something more, something powerful. In time, that wound healed, not without pain, not without cost, but with purpose, offered a chance to learn, to serve, to become a healer who could walk between the wisdom of her ancestors and the science of a new world. Lena said yes. She boarded the train not to escape her past, but to carry it forward. In her medicine pouch were not just trinkets, but stories. Blood, memory, identity. She had walked into death and come out reborn, not as a child of shame, but as a woman of purpose. A girl sentenced for her blood who became a healer of broken people. A bridge no longer feared, but needed. Lena's story teaches us that belonging is not given, it is forged. Sometimes in silence, sometimes in fire, but always through truth. And that brings us to the deeper lesson. What can we take from this tale, this wild, heartbreaking, miraculous story, and carry into our own lives? The lesson is this: you are not your origins. You are what you choose to become. Lena was born into division, raised in suspicion, and sentenced by fear. But she did not let that be the shape of her story. She could have accepted the death offered to her. She could have run from kindness when it was shown. She could have buried herself in grief or bitterness. But she didn't. She listened. She learned. She risked her life for something bigger than herself. And when given the chance to grow, she took it, even if it meant walking away from what was safe. In our world today, we still exile people. We still judge based on blood, appearance, background. We still fear what we do not understand. But Lena's story reminds us that healing comes not from rejecting difference, but from embracing it, from building bridges, from listening more than we speak, from standing up for what is right, even when it is not safe. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that sometimes we are the canyon. Sometimes we are the force that tests, the silence that judges. And we have to ask ourselves, what kind of story are we helping shape? Will we be the people who cast others out? Or will we be the ones who pull them from the edge and help them rise? Each of us, like Lena, carries stories we did not choose. Histories of pain, displacement, doubt. But within us also lies the power to choose what comes next. To become something new, something better. something that bridges the past and the future. Lena Graycloud did not survive because she was lucky. She survived because she was willing to become more than what the world believed she was. And so can you. If this story moved you, if Lena's journey lit something inside you, whether sorrow, hope, anger, or awe, then let that be the beginning of your own reckoning, your own transformation. And if you'd like to hear more untold stories like this, legends of courage, sacrifice, and redemption from the forgotten corners of the Wild West, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support gives us the strength to keep uncovering these powerful tales from the frontier, where history was written in dust, blood, and spirit. Stay wild, stay curious, and remember, some of the greatest heroes are the ones history tried to bury. We're here to dig them back up.